Every Shabbos is a one-time shot. Every Shabbos, every drasha is a one-time drasha opportunity to get that message home. They have one opportunity to hear that speech, to say it, to give it, to deliver it, and to hit home, and to move on.
Rabbi Daniel Grama is the rabbi of the Westside Shul in Los Angeles, and an award-winning teacher in Valley Torah Yeshiva High School. You may recognize Rabbi Grama's name from a highly popular episode of the 1840 podcast, featuring Rabbi Grama and his daughter Eliza, who co-host an Instagram live program together called Torah Tuesdays. Rabbi Grama is a self-described student of life. He learns from everyone and everything, and his approach to public speaking is no different. We discuss the role of speaker as Shaliach Tzibor, a representative of the congregation, and how that responsibility should shape the substance and the style of every presentation you give.
The word Shaliach Tzibor means you are a shliach, you are a messenger of the community. That means my job is to represent you, not you to listen to me. My job is to do what you want to hear. If I'm singing a tune that's not familiar to you, if I'm using a pace that doesn't make you feel comfortable, then not a good Shliach Tzibor.
You'll hear about how Rabbi Grama has evolved over the years as a speaker, with a little help from his wife. We also talk a lot about technique. If you want to learn different things you can do to keep the audience engaged, you're going to want to listen to this episode.
One of the Rosh Yeshivas used to have his hand motions worked out, and how he would use his hand at a certain point of expressing or teaching that shir.
We also discuss the value of vulnerability, opening up to your audience and letting them into your life as a means towards connecting with them and growing together through some of life's shared challenges. One thing that comes across loud and clear is how intentional a speaker Rabbi Grama is.
So I want them to remember me, okay, in the sense where this is the person that we connect with. This is the person that we find as a source of inspiration and encouragement. So when issues do come up, there's comfortability and there's an address that they know that they'll get a listening ear and someone who understands them and really wants what's best for them.
We share some jokes, some heartwarming stories, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot, as I did, from my conversation with Rabbi Daniel Grama. So the Westside Shul, so tell me a little bit about the origin of that.
Okay, so the Westside Shul is actually a fascinating origin. I came out to LA 27 years ago. I really wanted to go into Q. That was more of my thing. Post living in Kolo in Eretz Yisrael, we moved to Panama. I was there for a couple of years, and we were actually the first Kolo in Panama. And we did, learn during the day and then did outreach at night, which I was ready to do a little bit outreach in Israel. I realized that coming into the outreach community professionally was a challenge. I haven't been living in America for over 10 years. I had no network at that point. Long story, but eventually we had made a connection to Yeshiva University of Los Angeles, ULA, and they hired me. Long story short, I came out for an interview, and they hired me here, and that was good. I was a Rebbe. I did a bit of SY stuff a little bit. I used to give classes for them and ran some summer programs. And then there was a shul, part of Eula. I don't know if people don't know the history so much. Part of Eula is also a thing called Yola, Yeshiva of Los Angeles, which was for many years their base medrash and kolo program. And that kind of evolved to also having like a shul community, but it was really more like a kollel shul. It wasn't like a community per se. And they had other rabbanim there before me. And when the previous Rav of Nachum Sauer wanted to take a leave of absence, quit. So they asked me to take over the position. And that's how my furlough into abundance began. I was there for 13 years. And then I was recruited by some of my old Talmidim who were kind of starting up their own minyan in a previously existing shul. Okay, that shul was kind of dying out, and it was a great shidduch. And after much thought and internal struggling back and forth, eventually I took the job, and that unfortunately for different reasons closed after around 2 years. After 2 years, so I was now back on my own, no job, but a lot of fisher buses for myself, my family, which is really quite enjoyable. And about a month later or so, a lot of my old members came back and they said, "Look, we went back to our old shuls, and we no longer we enjoyed the experience we had, the last 2 years. We want to see if we can recreate it." And that was the beginning. That was the birth of the Westside Shul. 15 people. It's a very I like to call it modern Orthodox shtibel because it's modern Orthodox chevra 100%. But guys who are looking for a little bit more intimacy, a little bit more growth, more inspiration, something a little bit more in their life. They know who I am. They know what I represent. They were with me for 2 years, and they wanted that again. So we created this extremely warm and vibrant energy and atmosphere and community where we're and growth oriented, but doesn't conflict with the ability to be warm and embracing and extremely non-judgmental, extremely welcoming. It's really grown. Thank God. We have 2 minyanim, which combined has about 140 families.
Wow.
So it's the Baruch Hashem. It's really, really grown nicely, and it's really it's work, but it's a big source of pride for myself, obviously, and to see how it's grown. And it's really it's become a institution here in Los Angeles, on the Pico area. So thank God.
That must have been very flattering when you leave somewhere and then you get called back.
Yeah, it was. Yep. No false sense of modesty of it. It was a very, very warm and somewhat disappointing because I only had a month off. But I'm actually Yemenite descent from my father's side, and I remember like my last 2 weeks between the end of the previous shul and the beginning of the new shul, I said to my son, "Let's at least go to Yemenite shul at least once, so we can enjoy it." It's been years have had the opportunity. So we went to local Yemenite shul just to enjoy that Masorah again. But my shul is Ashkenazi. The shul is Ashkenazi shul.
So tell me about the transition from teaching. You were teaching kids in Eula.
Right. So I still remain as a Rebbe. That's still my primary thing. It was definitely a transition in a lot of ways, knowing how to adapt your mindset. You're not talking to kids, you're talking to adults. You can't interact the same way. Sometimes if people, someone talks to your dog, I snap my fingers at them, and my wife would say, "No, you can't do that." You can't do that.
Unless you're in Israel.
Right. Exactly. So that doesn't work anymore. The small thing like that, but more in the presentation is actually interesting. When my latest branch of shul, the Westside Shul, so we had a principal speak. We had some locals to come speak for Shabbos. And one of my more astute balabatim came over to me. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Nice." And I'm very obviously cautious what I say. He said, "I kind of felt that I felt like I was back in high school when he was talking to me. And I don't feel that with you." In other words, yeah, because this person speaks primarily to high school students. So I said to him, "I don't lecture high school students. I'm not a principal. I'm not getting up and giving shmooze or drasha on a weekly basis. I teach high school students. So my lecturing development and my lecturing skills wasn't born out of educational per se. It was more born out of my own rabbinical experience. So it could be that's why there's some nuance. But it's very interesting that he picked it up like that. And so if he's able to articulate it, I'm sure other people felt it. And it was very insightful for him to understand that. Because I was thinking the same thing. I couldn't say anything. But you have to be careful when you speak to Balabatim to speak on their level, not talk down to them, obviously, which never happened, but just how you speak to them is an expression of how you respect them and how you interact with them.
Yeah. So there's obviously a difference between a classroom environment and giving a drasha formal presentation. But even, I think you also did NCSY for a little while, where you're working with it. So Rabbi Glasser told me about the ebbing slot. There is a formal presentation that you also give to adolescents, to teens. Yeah. So what's the difference? What are some of the primary differences between giving a presentation to kids and adults?
So I think this. Every position of leadership has some authoritarian sense to it. I found it's very different I personally feel like if I'm talking to guys in my shul, there are people in my shul who are older than me. There are people in my shul who are respectable, balabatim, family people, business people. You have to connect on that level. You're not talking to high school kids who they totally, they totally see you in a very, very different light. They're seeing me in a different light. And therefore I'm seeing them and I have a responsibility to be in a different light to them. So I know when I'm speaking to kids, they're almost more hanging on things I say. They're more listening, more taking it in. That's just the nature of the relationship between a teacher and a high school student, between an NCSY leader and an NCSY, member. It's a different level. So I can get away with saying certain things. I could say it with a different tone. I can expect it. I'm not talking about Chas Shalom in any way be condescending. We're not talking about anything like that, Chas Shalom. It's just how you present yourself as in a sense of leadership is different. Sometimes the humor has to be adjusted. Obviously, the humor has to be, teenage humor is obviously going to be hopefully different than adult humor. Hopefully, so you want to be able to tap into that. You want to give each group and each element a sense that you're with them on their wavelength, and that's really the key. And you have to walk into any lecture that you're giving knowing who your audience is and knowing how to adapt yourself to what you think they expect from you. That's to me a major key of how a person's presenting has to get that mindset, which opens up to a very large discussion in general in preparing speeches, preparing lectures, preparing talks. I think often people will say what they want their audience to hear and not say what the audience need to hear. I want you to hear what I have to say versus me saying what you need to hear. That's the difference. And often people just want you to hear what they have to say, then you're going to miss the target because you can't, because a adult community is different than a high school community. More firm, less firm, more modern, less modern. They all make a difference in how you present things. One of my early experiences, I was a new Rebbe here in Los Angeles before I was involved with the rabbinate, and I get a call. It was a Thursday night. I remember it's after 10 o'clock for sure because I'd already davened the 10 o'clock Maariv. And I get a call from a school principal from a local elementary girls' school that they're having a Shabbaton that Shabbos. Their speaker, the teacher was supposed to speak, called in sick. Can I fill in? I don't teach elementary school. I don't teach elementary school girls. It's Thursday night. It's like after 10 o'clock. Short Friday because everyone makes a Shabbaton during the winter because you get the whole Shabbos, the whole Friday night. I said yes because the person who called me was a friend, and the entire trip up, I said to my wife, I said, please, no, nothing personal, but I can't talk during the drive. I need to really to think and process how I'm gonna. I had my one trick pony speeches before. I remember it was before Purim. I had my one Purim theme going on, and I spent the entire way thinking, how can I present this somewhat adult theme, adult presented, not theme but drasha for kids, elementary schools, and ended up coming with the entire game, became an interactive game I did during the speech itself. So I spoke a little bit, asked some questions, made a game, got people involved, and Baruch Hashem went very well. But for me, it was an extremely eye-opening understanding of my responsibility as a presenter to be able to present to people what they need to hear and how they need to hear it. And that was an eye opener for me and really helped give me guidance. I know my early years of the rabbinate, I didn't do that well. I did not do that well. The early years of the rabbinate, I was like, you have to hear what I have to say. I'm so smart. I'm such a Talmud Chacham. You need to hear everything I have to say. And I would speak and throw things out, this and that. You lose the crowd.
Yeah. What? So walk me through the beginning when you transitioned from into the rabbinate. how did you prepare for that slot, that speaking slot that you probably didn't have an experience in before? I mean, you've had classroom experience, you've had one-to-one experience in outreach, but how did you step into that role?
So, like most of us, we learn from our experiences. And I initially followed, the rabbis that I heard speak, which were not a lot because, again, I lived in Eretz Yisrael for many years and I lived in Panama for 2 years. So there was not that rabbinical presentation, that orator experience of hearing great rabbinical, about great orators speak and everything. So it was really what I was picking up more locally in that recent time. My father was a gifted speaker, but he didn't really have a pulpit. So I didn't hear him often. So it's really what I was picking up at that time, which wasn't always the best. That's the truth, because sometimes I was more mimicking than learning from. And I realized that I had to really find my place in my niche. I think all of us are influenced by different speakers. You, as a person who's involved in comedy to some degree, obviously have people that you would kind of follow and mimic, and I guess your role models, as we say.
Yeah.
I would say that my generation for sure, even people younger than me, we were very much influenced. I feel, and I know I was, and I think others were as well, by Pesach Krohn, who was like the master speaker of that time. He gave classes on speaking, and so that definitely had an influence on myself. I actually used to call him. I called him a few times in my career, introducing myself and saying, "Help," need something. And he's very, very, always very kind and very gracious to give me time, give me an idea. But the point is that, you start off at a certain place, but you have to really be conscientious that this is a responsibility that you have. It's kind of you're like a shliach tzibur in a shul. Okay, the word shliach tzibur means you are a shliach, you're a messenger of the community. That means my job is to represent you, not you listen to me. My job is to do what you want to hear. If I'm singing a tune that's not familiar to you, if I'm using a pace that doesn't make you feel comfortable, then I'm not a good shliach tzibur. I can have a great voice, but I'm not a shliach tzibur because I'm not representing you as you asked me to be. And I think a speaker is also, in a certain sense, a shliach of the tzibur. We're hiring you, we're bringing you in, we're asking you to elevate us, inspire us, educate us, guide us. And I have to do that in a way that represents who they are. With all of that interest in mind, inspiration, education, etc. So I had to kind of, over the years, figure out what was working, what wasn't working. And that takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought and a lot of discussion. I love feedback. I'm such a big feedback guy. I love it. And one of the hardest things is to get real honest feedback, because no matter how much you tell your balabas, I really want to hear what you have to say. They don't really believe it. And but I really do. I really, really want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear what's working, what's not working. Am I a good storyteller? Am I not a good storyteller? Do you like the ideas which I'm presenting, or don't like the ideas? Am I working with them? Am I off? Am I on? So I had to really work with that a lot and kind of get a sense what was landing, what was not landing. Now, any rabbi will tell you, without doubt, they had the experience that the most prepared drasha, sometimes this landed wrong, and the thing that they had to put together, 10 minutes before Shabbos, like, Rabbi, that was the best speech you ever heard. So, you can't, yes, you can't win. But when they say that to you, they say to them, okay, so what, I have to try to understand. And I'd say to them, what did you like about it? What did you like about that speech that you felt that landed well with you? We like this, we like, and then I'd go home and think about what worked. And if that worked, I almost never speak unprepared. Even by simcha. But I have to then kind of analyze and say, okay, what was it that landed well with them? What did I hit? What was a bullseye that hit? Was 3 people came over to me and said, Rabbi, we love that speech. So I need to think about that. So just through osmosis, and not just osmosis, but through learning process and really thinking about it and analyzing it, because look, you're in a real position of leadership. You're in a position, those 15 minutes, whatever the time is up there, you're there to inspire, to hit the hardest you can, to gain the most that you can. You want to touch people in the most serious, realist way that's going to inspire them, that's going to elevate them, that's going to want to come back and hear you again. Because you have a message to give. That's why they asked you to be the rabbi. That's why they brought you out to speak. And that's a responsibility you have to recognize. You know, I'm not a big believer in planning your speeches like during the summertime, right? Because there's so many things that happen from week to week nowadays, for sure. How could you could have a vort maybe, I don't know, but there's so many things, and sometimes I'm in a different mood. I may be in a different place. I may be feeling something different. So how do I prepare my drushes 2 months in advance, 3 months in advance? I don't feel if I do that, I'm speaking to the crowd. I really don't.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of a let's say like a radio talk show host, where day in day out you're connecting with audience, and so for the talk show host to prepare something a month in advance is they're missing all that connection and right. life experience together in that course right. of that month. The audience might be in a different place. The talk show host might be in a different place by that point.
And you'll know. Listen, you know what you're feeling or what you're thinking. And if I locked myself into a vort in the middle of beautiful July, you know, sitting on my outside, whatever, and I said a great vort, and then here comes Yom Neroim, or comes even after that, comes, I don't know, Bereshis Noach, like, you're not there. You are not there. You're not in that place. If that vort no longer resonates with you, it's finished. You know, very often I look at my old notes and I say, that was interesting vort. I could never say that today. You know, either the vort itself changed. You look at it, humor is the same way. Humor changes so much over generations, over time. So much has changed, evolved in such different styles and formats and presentation and what's called funny. The same thing with learning. You know, you look at the earlier achronim versus the later achronim, and the same thing with speakers. You know, what was once was required to present with a high fluent level of vocabulary and a certain level of eloquence, and you know, almost a staunch presentation that's not the vibe anymore. You know, I used to love to watch. I used to listen to Moshe Shera, and he used to listen to Martin Luther King and his famous speech. And I said, that's a good idea. And I started listening to Martin Luther King, watch the speech and analyze the speech. And, you know, I grew up in Englewood, New Jersey, where the Rav there of the only shul in town was Rabbi Swift, who was a brilliant speaker, Englishman. So he had that edge, he had the English edge. But it was a very different style of presentation. It was much more, I guess, stiffer is the word to use, you know, much more proper, much more, and now it's
formal.
Yeah, mine is much more fluid, much looser. Like, I know I came to LA once and I walked into a certain shul and the guy gets up and says, he starts his speech with the word so. So I was like, what? what happened before that? You know, they start a book with the word so, like, you know, certain things don't do. But okay, so I learned that in LA these things work. You know, this is so I kind of looked. What?
Where are you starting from?
That's so fun. It was, but that in a way, people want that more casual tone a little bit. You have to kind of, again, I'm a shliach tzibur, so I have to begin to adjust and adapt myself a little bit to how I think I can present in the more contemporary way of presentation. Doesn't mean I don't have to reinvent myself totally. I don't think so, but you want to make sure that you're with what the community is appreciating of hearing, their style of listening versus my style of speaking. So, you know, like I said, I would watch, I would learn, I listened to other speakers, I listened both audibly and then, you know, live, and say, I liked how they did that, and I liked how they did that. It's an ongoing educational progress. It's ongoing educational. And anyone who stops, I think in general in life, anyone who stops learning, you stop being a student. I call myself a student of life, you know, a student of life for life. To me, that's like a big thing, because as we all know, you can never really stop learning and get comfortable with where you are and who you are, because then that's the purpose of life. So you want to be able to constantly improve yourself and work on yourself and say, what more can I do? And every time we have a guest speaker in my shul, I'm like, I liked how they did that. And that was interesting. And my wife would say, well, stop it. You're a good speaker. You're a good speaker. And I say, thank you. But I really want to see, you know, one thing I also learned over years, and that kind of the tangent of this, that, if you think about it, if you break down all rabbi speeches, it's like 4 or 5 topics. It's got a couple of it on Chavero, a couple of it on Makom, and then like one bit on La'atzmo, And you take all those speeches and it's really it's the same gift. It just matter how you gift wrap it. So, I find myself so 2 things. Number one, I try to kind of branch out of that a little bit. In other words, not be locked into that very limited category of Ben Al Mechaber and Al Makom. Maybe speak more about cloud things or larger things. Number one, and number 2 is, look, I have my style. I'm a practical Yeshiva assistant for the most part. My way of thinking has been trained by them. But you know what? There's some beautiful Torah out there, like the Chassidische Torah, and I've dabbled in Machshava. Some great stuff out there. And when you open yourself up and expose yourself to see the different approaches and the different styles, and you base a drasha, you incorporate something which is not part of your normative approach and your way of thinking, but you bring that in a nice Shavuot or something a little bit different, something a little bit more philosophical sometimes. It gets the crowd. It gets the crowd constantly never knowing where they're going. What I feel is one of my bigger compliments. When someone taught somebody else, he says, "I like when Rabbi Grama speaks because you never know what's coming." And I find that to be a very big compliment. I'm not static. And sometimes I will be very, very, high, inspirational, motivational, intense, and sometimes I'll be more calm and more chilled. Because not everything requires everything at all times. Sometimes, again, you have to go to vibe in the shul. Sometimes you walk into a shul on a Shabbos morning and you have to say, hey, I'm not feeling it. Well, they're not feeling it. The davening is, a little bit low. Like trying to get up and get this rah-rah speech, that's going to like, okay, Rabbi, we just want to go home. It's raining in LA, Rabbi. So we're done. We went down below 60 degrees. We want to get home already. So, you have to kind of get the feel of the room also sometimes and absorb that into yourself while you're davening, while you're sitting there. Say, okay, I was planning this speech on this kind of tone, but that may not be what they need to hear right now. So how can it's a lot about that constant thinking. How can I present to them with changing it up, with new ideas, with new approaches, with taking other styles of things sometimes and incorporating everything at one point or another.
Yeah. What was some of the early feedback that you got that shaped you, that shaped the way you speak today?
Well, my wife's not home, so I could say the length was definitely needed work. I was definitely speaking my early years.
Too short.
Exactly. All the it's only a half hour. Yeah. My early years, I was speaking a solid 25 minutes. Okay, 20 to 25 minutes, a solid 25 minutes. In fact, a cousin of mine back east said to me once, she said, hey, I just met these people, they're in your shul for Shabbos. He said, you spoke great, a little bit too long. So, okay, yeah, check box for the a little too long. So my wife, I have to really credit my wife. My wife trained me. She really did. Not in the very early years because she wasn't as involved, but when I guess my next jobs, she would literally, I know she's not listening to this podcast afterwards. I can say anyway. She would like literally either raise her hand with her watch above the mechitza, like literally stick her hand up and with a hand. One time the mechitza was a little bit more viewable, so she'd give me the hand signal by her neck, like and that's like 6 minutes into the speech. Now, like, and she would say to me, like, you're in such a great spot. You're in such a great place. If you would end it then and land it there, it would be fantastic. If you stepped on another 2 minutes, it was great, but you lost the impact of that, of that punch. So that was a lot of her constructive criticisms. That was a big thing, and she was right, and she's 100% right. I recently found out that two or three of my Balabatim, when I speak, they actually have a bet. I'm going to be over or under, you know. So I said, first, what's my line? They say you line about 13 to 14 minutes. I said, okay, I can handle that. And then they have a bet. I'm going to be over or under that day. You know, my stat. So people really are watching out for that. They really are. Um, I would say also the feedback was sometimes things were a little bit too intense, complicated. You know, you're giving a drush, not a shear. And that's something I think sometimes people lose sight of. That's the line I actually heard from somebody. You want to give a drush, not a shear. A shear is typically more intellectual stimulating, can be a little bit more complex. That's what people are expecting. A drush has to be more about question, answer, story, vort, and impact. And you know that stage has to be more fluid and know how to present it in a way which doesn't make it complex beyond. Because people have already been in shul for an hour and a half, you know, whatever it is, they have Kiddush waiting for them, they have the Shabbos waiting for them. They want to walk home inspired in most communities and not hearing the shir. So that was another thing I had to tweak. You know, again, originally coming more from the Kollel world, learning was everything, and a drasha was meant to be more of a shir, and it was meant to be more of a yisoid, and you know what I'm saying. So then you often got lost and entangled into that forest of not knowing where the shir ends and the drasha begins. So that was an important feedback. Um, and then also, this wasn't so much feedback, but I take a lot of lessons from presentation, raising your voice, lowering your voice, when to do it, when not to do it, you know, make all that impact and things. Some people speak, like one of my colleagues said to me, he said, I actually like the way you do it. And he said about himself, he said, I always speak in a high tone. He said, you don't. You'll start low, you get high. Like he said, you use your voice better than I do. That was very positive feedback for me to understand that that's actually something that people are appreciating. So those are some of the things. Both the length is important, the complexity versus simplicity of it. Simplicity doesn't mean dumb it down as far as context. This means the presentation, the complexity of it. And then, you know, using your voice and using your body language also is very important. You know, when I was teaching, I learned that a teacher's desk is part of your material, or lack of a better word, a weapon or a tool to use. So if I want to be authoritative, I stand behind the desk. If I want to kind of work with the boys a little bit and get a little bit more into them, I'll go in front of the desk or walk around the desk. The desk becomes like a barrier, almost like a throne that says, here I am. I'm here standing behind my desk. This is my desk. I'm a teacher. And I want to put that behind me and kind of interact with you guys and become one with you, because that's what I want to do. That's what I feel is needed right now. A bima is very similar. Not at the same level, but a bima can be very, very similar. And when you walk around the sides of the bima or you use the bima in different ways, that becomes a message to the crowd. You know, if I'm walking in front of the bima or to the side of it, and I'm emphasizing a point, that means like I really want you to hear this. I'm bringing it closer to you. I'm presenting it to you even closer than I normally would, because this is really important for you to hear. If I walk around in my base measure, my shul is more wide than it is deep. So I have to be aware of that, of knowing that I have to speak to both sides of the room. So I have to kind of pace back and forth a little bit, but at the same time, making sure my voice is still headed both sides. It's, you know, it takes a lot of that awareness, but the bima becomes somewhat a part of your prop of when you're speaking. You know, I've seen some rabbis who they're very busy with the talis during the speech. You know, they're very busy with the talis. They're always picking the talis. We get it. You have a talis, you know, your talis is nicer than mine. We get it. But let's not be too distracting with it. You know, let's not overly, you know, sometimes it helps. Sometimes you want to, it gives you a pause. But you want to use all these things as kind of props as part of your presentation. It's not nothing. When I left Eretz Yisrael, no, before I moved to LA, so I went to Eretz Yisrael for a short visit, and I went to Marash Yeshiva, Rabbi Berman, and I said to him, I'm going to Chinuch, give me an Eitzah. He said, every word you say has to be prepared. And he was a master of that. Every word you say has to be prepared. And early years of Chinuch, I worked on it, but, it's harder. High school teaching is not the same thing. But I don't know if he told this to me or someone else told me that one of the Rosh Yeshivas used to have his hand motions worked out and how he would use his hand at a certain point of expressing or teaching that shir. This is a shir, not a drasha. And he would have the motion worked out when he wanted to emphasize different points. Everything's a prop. Everything's a tool to use in the right way. And we don't realize the nuances. That's why, I think Moshe Sher used to talk about Martin Luther King, to watch how he stands, watch how his feet are planted, watch how his hands are moved. Like everything becomes part of that speech in a really, really subtle way. But that helps get the message brought home in a stronger way. And either they like it, so you're more engaging. They don't like it, so you're less engaging. But, I was once at a speech of a fantastic speaker, renowned speaker, and he's speaking at some banquet, and he's really getting into it. But it's like his glasses were flying, his yarmulke was slipping. I was like, and he's like planting and breathing. Like, I'm here at a banquet. I'm here to enjoy my night. I'm here to have a nice steak and a cup of wine, and hear a good speech and go home. Like, I thought it was too much, and my wife also walked away. So that was like a little intense, So you have to kind of know how to get that,
I saw a video that you spoke at an event probably over a decade ago. It was about surrounding a family tragedy, and it was very inspiring. I remember the point was about finding the positive details surrounding the negative experience. And I was going to ask you, what this was probably before you became a rabbi, before you...
In the middle. It was in the middle of my first job.
Uh-huh. So what happens when you experience something like that? When did you feel ready to address it publicly? What went into that?
That's a good question. So just for those who may be listening, we had unfortunately lost his son in a car accident. He's had his 11th yahrzeit. It was hard. It was hard to balance my true emotions versus the elephant in the room. I think I have to say, it wasn't immediate. It was not immediate for sure. Now it wasn't immediate. I remember thanking the community for the support, definitely. But I don't think I addressed it immediately in an open way. What was interesting was it was about 2 years after that I switched jobs. That kind of gave me almost kind of a fresh start. With that, history was no longer part of my persona with my community. There was less expectation about it. It's interesting. Everyone has sorrows, everyone has challenges. And I don't believe that my sorrow, my challenge is more valuable than someone else's. Sometimes people give like a yahrzeit share for their father. And I'm not so comfortable. Like a lot of people lost fathers. Just because I happen to be the Rav doesn't mean I could talk about my father more than you can give a share on your father. Like, I'm not so comfortable with that. I will bring it up at times when I feel there's a lesson that can be derived as far as overcoming challenges. It's also very sensitive because you don't want it really lowers the temperature in the room. And it's not such a fair thing to do. if you're on a regular weekly Shabbos, unless it's really, really necessary. Everyone knows what happened. Everyone knows the experience. I'll tell you what I have used more, and not often, but a little bit more, was we have a daughter who, post the passing of our son, got involved with drugs and stuff, and that was her own journey. And that I reflected on a little bit more publicly than the death of our son, because that's definitely a little bit more unique in a sense, not as heavy, and much more lesson oriented. What it means to have that journey, what it means to go through a challenge, what it means to stick with that child, keep the connection. I think the first time I spoke about it publicly was in that 2-year stint shul, was Kol Nidre. That's a very powerful Kol Nidre, and there people were like, a lot of people didn't even know, because Kol still kind of knew. I actually did reflect on my son. By his 10th year at site, so we did a Hachnas Sefer Torah, and I shared a very moving story about when we finally brought the Sefer Torah back into the Aron. I was unable to close the doors because I felt like I was saying goodbye to him again, and that was too much for me. So I asked someone else to do it, and I used that during the Ela the following year. As what it means that sometimes you're in a place you don't want to step away from that place. You want to stay there. That's what an Ela should be like. The Ela should be like, I'm in that place. I don't want to walk away. I don't want to separate from that moment. So, yeah, but typically I just find it very, very heavy. I also have to be sensitive to my wife. She's extremely private when it comes to these things, much more private than I am when it comes to talking about these things. And for me to bring it up in public wouldn't be fair to her, especially if she's in the audience. So I have to also be very, very sensitive about that.
Mm-hmm. So I saw you were on the 1840 podcast, the Shevkin's podcast. At what point had you already been public about it with your Kehila at that point already?
Yeah. When we did that, I was already spoken about for sure that Kol Nidre Drasha for sure, and probably touched upon it here and there. But yeah.
And how did your daughter, was she on board with that, or did you?
Oh, she's.
Mm-hmm. So she knew she would be.
It's winded up and she'll go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she's very open. She loves to talk about these things. She likes the attention, so she's very on board with speaking about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I would have never done it. The whole thing led to was born from a Instagram thing that we do. It was called Torah Tuesday every Tuesday night, and Rabbi Shevkin heard about it. So that's why it was my daughter's idea to do it, and she kind of MCs it. She hosts it, and then I get the Dvar Torah. So that's why he liked the whole idea of us having that relationship, still connected, and that's what gave birth to that interview, to that podcast. So, yeah, so she's very willing to speak about these things. Yeah, maybe too much sometimes.
How do you sense that your congregation relates to that part of you, of your personal life? Do they see you does kind of bring you down to their size a little bit, that as a human being?
So much. Especially the 2 points. One is regarding, because again, I work with a very modern community. So my daughter, who at that point, and even to this point, not Shomer Shabbos, unfortunately, not yet. So as she began to go off, and her dress code changed, and et cetera, and they saw in me the ability to still connect to people, to somebody who's so close to me, who lives a very different lifestyle than I do. And yet we still remain very, very close. My daughter, there was never a thought of otherwise. we have a small back house as common here in Los Angeles. And at one point the suggestion was maybe she should just move back there. I said, absolutely not. I said, I'd rather suffer all the all the troubles and the journeys and the fights and the screaming, the throes of her rebelliousness and all that. I'd rather but know that she's still part of the family. The moment she goes back there is when we lose her from being connected to us. So they appreciated that ability to connect and to really love, and they saw that it's a very non-judgmental approach that I was taking, and I think that resonated with them a lot. It also allows them to typically feel more comfortable opening up and sharing some of their things with myself, knowing that they'll get a sympathetic ear who really understands what they may be going. Again, everyone's challenge is different, but at least I understand what challenges are. I get it. If I speak from the pulpit about chinuch sometimes, you know what I mean? They know that I'm not just speaking just as a teacher or just as a parent. That somebody's gone through difficult situations. They had to really get hold of parenting 101 in order to make things work. So it definitely has an impact for sure.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your preparation. You said that every remark should be prepared. So what goes into preparation?
There is a lot. Preparation is a lot. I think the Chassidus is strong speaking about, the Ein Kedusha B'li Hachana, right? If you don't prepare, you're not. I started thinking about it, my Devar Torah, like in the beginning of the week, like even before Havdalah on Tuesday. Like I'm ready thinking about that ready next Shabbos, especially now that we do the Torah Tuesday. Just as a parsha vort, I'm already kicking into that mode. I'm already thinking about it, and I'm grappling with different ideas and different thoughts and different concepts. Like I said before, you have to really see try to get a sense of what the audience is holding, and if it's just a regular parva Shabbos, in that sense, you want to kind of come up with a theme. It's very hard. One of my personal challenges is saying with confidence, "Oh, they're going to love this idea. This is what they're going to really want to hear about." Like I'm not a good shadchan. I could never put, why would I don't know why people know each other, but so same thing also. Like, how do you necessarily put together an idea of say this is the idea this crowd wants to? I like the idea. I think it's a great chop. I think it's a great this. I don't know for sure that's what they want to hear. How do I know for sure that that's what's going to captivate them? So that takes process. That takes work. So I'm doing research. I unfortunately don't have the luxury as much time as I would like to have because of I'm a full-time Rebbe and in the shul, obviously, and then also a therapist. I do social work as well. So my time is very, very, scheduled and structured. And I designate time for that, obviously. But I can't say that I'm able to research as much as I do. I go through the Parsha every day, working on it. I'm a big chassid of the Nitziv. That's my go-to. Not necessarily my go-to. You should know, Nitziv here is I happen to have, my Nitziv. I hardly quote him in my drasha. I'll throw him in as a side point sometimes. Once in a while, I'll use him as the main word. He doesn't. I just don't think he speaks to what my crowd needs to hear. I love him, but it doesn't mean they're going to love him. So I'll use him as an ancillary idea sometimes as a support. So you have to really start working on it. You have to start thinking about it early in the week. I think just give yourself time to percolate ideas, to get ideas going, to think. You have to filter ideas. Okay, that was a nice word. I'll listen to different things while I drive to work about a half hour. In the mornings, I'll try to listen to things sometimes then, just to get different thoughts and different ideas. Then comes the sit-down preparation time. We have to really hunker down and say, this has to work. And sometimes, like, I'm approaching a drasha sometimes like a sugya. In the sense where, number one, the question really the answer has to really answer the question. Sometimes if you're like forcing it, if you're saying you have to sell it to the guy, then stop it. And he said like this. No, just stop. Then it's not resonating. You like the chop, it's a nice idea, but if it's not matching, if it's not fluid, if it's not flowing, put it aside. If you see in your mind, if you're envisioning you're saying that drasha, which I do, I envision how I'm going to say those words. If you're envisioning it in a way that I'll raise my voice and then I'll really bring out, if you try to sell them the idea as opposed to inspire them with the idea, then let it go. That's my opinion. Then it's not, it's not gonna land, it's not gonna hit them the way you think it's gonna hit them in your mind. It's just not. So you have to kind of filter that out and say what's going to work, what's not going to work, what's real, what's not real. So like I said, sometimes I'll go through I personally don't typically just take a shot out of a safer. This is my personality. I like to develop something more personal. That is either build on the question or kind of help develop my own answer, because then I feel it becomes more part of me, and then I feel like I'm presenting it more authentically. And it's also just part of my training and learning. I like to kind of come up with novel ideas and approaches, but it has to be real. It has to be a real good vort in order to make sure that's going to work. Don't just sell it because it's a good chiddush. You're not saying leaving a chabura in your kolel or base measures where guys can challenge you and question you and then shoot you down and you have to respond, this and that. This is a one-time shot. Every Shabbos is a one-time shot. Every Shabbos, every drasha is a one-time drasha opportunity to get that message home. They have one opportunity to hear that speech, to say it, to give it, to deliver it, and to hit home and to move on. It can't be wishy-washy. It can't be, it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Then it's a strikeout.
So what are you looking for when you go through the parsha? You look through the svarim and you find the vort. Like how do you know you found something?
So, we talk about the hook in the speech, right? At the beginning of the speech. So I once had the opportunity to spend some time with Rabbi Benjamin Blech, renowned speaker and author. I said, do you believe in like the hook or like the joke, the story at the beginning of the speech? He goes, nah. And he's like a super renowned. He told me, he knows a rabbi who locked himself into that, and sometimes it's terrible because he's saying a story or a joke that has no relevance or very like a thread of irrelevance to the vort, and it's just like leave it. So what I look for is a question that could be a hook. I want my hook to be the question. I want my hook to say, I want to get their minds thinking a little bit. Yeah. Like to me, I love a question personally that I read this post like 100 times. How come I never saw this question? How did I miss this great question? The Netziv asks when Avram separated from Lot and he said, you go to the right and I'll go to the left, whatever, says the Netziv, why do they both have to leave? Hello? Right?
I've had that question.
That's a great question. That's a hook. Right? That's a great hook. I don't need more than that.
Right. To separate people, only one person has to go.
Right. It's a great question. If I could find a question like that, if I could find a hook like that, and obviously it has to be something which I could develop a theme out of, but that's a question which you want to say, that's your hook. So I look for a question, I look for something, an idea that the question will stimulate the mind a little bit, get them curious about something which they know about already. I try to avoid bringing in things which I assume they don't know but too much about. I try to avoid that because then I'm just teaching them. Whenever you want a person to grow in anything, you want to work with what they know already and enhance and develop that. A guy becomes a Baal Tshuva, you want to teach them about Kiddush because they know a little bit about Kiddush. Let's talk about Kiddush. You know Kiddush already, so if you're doing it already, let me help you do it better, right? If they're doing that, or whatever the case may be. So I believe you always want this educationally, you want to kind of help people nurture what they're comfortable with already and develop that more and take that to the next level of inspiration, of education, of knowledge. So I'll try to find topics that are based on themes or ideas of the Parsha that they would typically, obviously you go into Vayikra, it's a little bit more challenging because then we don't know about that too much. So, but again, that's to me like a theme where something which I think they know about and something which will capture their thought process. What I do as the beginner drasha, I will always say, well, I keep my introduction very standard. Good Shabbos, thank you for just, because sometimes that standard introduction just sets the tone we're back to doing the drasha, and then I'll take where I want to go. It's kind of like when I teach, I always take attendance out loud in the classroom, right? And the kids Rebbe just look around, you see who's not here. I said, I know, but when you hear me taking attendance, you know I'm trying to get the class settled. So good Shabbos, everybody. Welcome. So it's 30 seconds. It's static, but that kind of gets the message. We're now about to start the drasha, and that kind of gets them to their place. Buckle up, with your seatbelts on. We're on a journey out together, and then hopefully the hook works out well.
Yeah. So maybe this leads into my next question, which is, what's the goal? What's the purpose of the drasha? Because you could come up with a great hook, a great kasha, but if the answer doesn't really move them or whatever the goal is going to be, so then it's only as good as the kasha.
Right. I'm saying. Those are one of the great, brilliant speakers, which was not so known in America. He was English. Isaac Bernstein. This is a brilliant orator, and he gave this amazing shir of little ideas in the parsha, and they were just a vort. They were just mamshuba, meshach chachma, to me, just a vort with no takeaway lesson. But he's such a great presenter, and people come for that. They're coming for the morning shir someplace in his shul. That's what they're coming for. You have to walk away with something. You have to walk away with the message that's going to teach them or inspire them, encourage them to be better, but not with chasam discouraging them. There's never a vort that's going to say, unless I'm really have to give some about Musar openly, and I'll say to them, you have to forgive me, I have to speak about something. But otherwise, one of my Balbas says, Rebbe, whenever he said, he was always a student of mine, he said, Rebbe, you always make us feel like a flower that blossoms. Which is nice. In other words, it's always encouraging, always what you're doing is great, but you can do more. Never ever get comfortable with who you are. Value yourself. This big theme of mine is to value yourself. When you value yourself, then you value what you do and value others and you value God and value Torah. If we're not valuing ourselves, then there's not a lot of material to work with. So that's a lot. I speak a lot about that, trying to weave that in. I'm very growth oriented, and my goal for my community is to inspire them in a place where they can see within themselves that they're greater than they think they are, and therefore there's so much more to grow to who they actually can become. That's, if I have to say in a nutshell, that's probably my goal.
Mm-hmm. So when you're looking for your hook or your kasha or whatever it is, I guess with one eye you're also looking for it to be able to develop it to fuel that purpose.
Correct. If I can't come up with an answer that's not going to resonate with the message I want to give, I'll scratch it. I'll definitely scratch it. I like the questions. My netziv, I like a lot of his questions. It's just not all of them are going to, end up on my paper. Not going to end up on my bima, because I can't extract a more powerful, meaningful lesson, at least from my perspective, that's going to be meaningful to me and resonate with me, which will allow me to share it with the passion and authenticity that I want them to hear it. It has to end up with some message. If it's not going there, then often I speak to a mutual friend, Rabbi Glasser. We talk weekly about our drushes, and very often we'll say to each other, what are you speaking about? And then they often so we'll say, okay, so what's the takeaway? Nice idea. What's the takeaway? What's the audience walking away with? Right? If we can't come up with something, either one of us, either way, then we'll say, okay, maybe you have to tweak it like this or tweak it like that, or give a different spin. So because if there's no takeaway, then I think it's chaval. Again, in my community for sure, there's not people who are engaged in Torah and Avoda, the other 6 days of the week. This isn't my opportunity, my responsibility to get them to a place where they want to think about being osik in a Torah and Avoda for the rest of the week. And this is my opportunity to do it, my primary opportunity to do it.
How do you measure success? How do you measure the effectiveness of your drushes?
That's a great question. I'm obviously great, so I don't have to measure my success. Um, I think I measure it by a couple of things. Um, First, I'm always watching the crowd, where their eyes are and where they're not. Okay. If I see their eyes are on me, then I know I'm being successful. If I see the spacing out, I'm not hitting them. Right. And I have to be honest. I was once at a family simcha, and there's this guy in our mishpacha who loves to speak and on and on. And at one point, one of his siblings was trying to give him a signal, like, end it. And he interpreted to me like, go on, go on. So you have to kind of be honest. When the guy's always looking away from you, he's not contemplating your thought. He's like thinking, when is this going to be over? So, sometimes I'll watch the people if they're not nodding their heads, in agreement, or, that it's resonating with them. That's just as I'm speaking.
So engagement.
Engagement. Yeah, thank you. To see if that's happening. If sometimes people ask questions after, here and there, it doesn't have to be a lot. It's not going to be every week. If once in a while someone asks a question and wants to discuss a point further, that means that with one person at least it resonated. If it resonated with one, it resonated with a few. And then there's more the intangibles. First of all, if they keep coming back, if they're not running away from my speech. Unfortunately, in our world, no news is good news. No feedback is good feedback. If I don't get criticism, if I don't get critiqued, if I don't get try this, try that, I mean, that's actually a compliment. So I rely on that as well. And then in general, I see if overall, if people are beginning to grow, if more people are attending a minyan, if more people are doing things they haven't done before, that's what I look for. That's my measuring gun. I'm looking at my shul and I'm watching different people who have been grown in many ways. The level of limud Torah has become much more advanced. Participation in minyan has become more advanced. How they dress, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that the speech plays a role in that. Because again, when you give a speech which is inspiring, not inspiring, but encouraging to be better and to be greater, and you can do it, then that's definitely making an impact somewhere along the journey. Mm-hmm. So that's how I measure it.
How important is it to you that it's memorable at all, that people will remember what you say?
Including myself?
What emphasis do you put on that? Do you?
Look, I look back at two things. I look back at, like, I was, as a Rebbe, I look back at my high school experience. Okay. Do I remember what Masechtas I learned? I could probably list them, most of them, in those 4 years. Listed very, 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 very little of what I learned, but I remember who taught them to me. So, two things. So, I want them to remember me. Okay, in the sense where this is the person that we connect with. This is the person that we find as a source of inspiration and encouragement. So when issues do come up, there's comfortability and there's an address that they know that they'll get a listening ear and someone who understands them and really wants what's best for them. That's number one. Number two is I don't need to remember the exact lesson, and it does happen. People say, yeah, actually recently, I remember you said this and this. It's kind of like, it's just simply like sand, they just one little grain builds on the next, it builds on the next, it builds on the next. Next thing you know, you have a sandcastle. Right? Each thing grows on the next. If they remember the exact verse, if they remember the exact thing, it'd be nice. I remember one Shabbos had upper from shul and had two grand slam jokes in that drasha. Okay.
You want to share one?
Well, one is a little bit too long to share, but the quick bar at the end. So I got married on a Sunday. Okay. And I dropped this joke from something I found online. And so I remember a guy came. So I got married on Sunday. So the joke is like this. So as the last thing I say to the speech, after giving the whole rush and the speech is speaking about the chatan or the kal or whatever, I said, I also got married on a Sunday. And I remember the guy by the shul came over to me and he said, he said, Daniel, like, today's the happiest day of your life. And I said, but I'm getting married tomorrow. He says, I know. And then he kind of deadpan it, woke up from there, and everyone's like, So it was a great one-liner, to miss the day. Just kind of wrapped up the. The other joke was it's just too long. I'll tell you a different time.
Okay.
Anyway, so I remember walking in the street to the upper Kiddush. Oh, Rabbi, we heard you gave a great speech. Oh, great jokes, man. Great jokes. Great.
I always remember the jokes. I always remember the stories, the jokes.
Excuse me. So, like I said, if they remember Harezim Meshubach, great, kol kavod. If not, as long as it's just building a sandcastle. And that's what kind of monitoring, about my time. That'd be nice, yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Hatzlacha Rabbah, and continued success to you.
Amen. Thank you.
I hope to keep in touch.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. There's a secret the great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now.